Security will escort you out in 10 minutes, Jefferson. Pack your things. Chairman Richard Steinberg's words cut through the mahogany-paneled boardroom like a blade, delivered with the casual cruelty reserved for those deemed expendable. The live-stream camera captured every second as Malik Jefferson, the first black CEO of defense giant Cortez Dynamics, absorbed the shock of his public execution. 7 white board members sat around the oval table, their faces displaying the satisfied smugness of a coordinated ambush. No vote had been called, no procedures followed, just raw corporate power wielded against the man who had built their Houston-based company into an $800 million Pentagon contractor. Malik's worn leather briefcase rested beside his chair, containing 18 months of careful preparation they knew nothing about. Protocol 7, his strategic response to their systematic discrimination, waited to be activated with a simple text message. The red recording light blinked steadily as viewers joined what was advertised as an emergency board meeting. They had no idea they were about to witness the most spectacular corporate reversal in American business history. As Steinberg's smirk widened, Malik Jefferson quietly reached for his phone. The real show was about to begin. Malik entered the boardroom with the understated confidence of a man who had earned his position through merit, not politics. His simple white dress shirt, pressed black slacks, and modest black leather shoes stood in stark contrast to the ostentatious wealth displayed around the table. Rolex submariners, Italian silk ties, and custom-tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. "Good morning, everyone," Malik said, his voice steady and professional as he took his seat at the head of the table. The leather chair, marked with a small brass nameplate reading CEO, had been his domain for 3 years, but today it felt more like a defendant's chair in a courtroom. Chairman Steinberg didn't rise to greet him, barely acknowledging Malik's presence with a curt nod. Margaret Chen, the company secretary, fumbled with her tablet, her hands trembling slightly as she avoided eye contact. We're ready to begin the special board meeting," she stammered, her usual composure cracking under the weight of what she knew was coming. The other board members, Thompson, Rodriguez, Williams, Patterson, Morrison, and Davies, exchanged glances loaded with barely concealed contempt. Thompson crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, his body language broadcasting dismissal and superiority. Rodriguez whispered something to Williams, who smirked in response, their behavior more appropriate for a high school cafeteria than a corporate boardroom. "Would anyone like coffee?" Malik offered, reaching for the carafe in the center of the table. The gesture was met with silence, so profound that the hum of the building's ventilation system became audible. Even this simple courtesy, something he had done in every meeting for 3 years, was now being weaponized against him through deliberate neglect. Patterson tapped his Mont Blanc pen against his legal pad with metronomic precision, the sound creating an undercurrent of irritation designed to unsettle. Davies openly checked his iPhone, thumbs flying across the screen as if Malik's presence was so insignificant it didn't warrant his attention. "I wasn't aware we had scheduled an emergency meeting," Malik continued, his tone remaining diplomatic despite the increasingly hostile atmosphere. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a leather-bound planner, the pages filled with his neat handwriting documenting every meeting, every decision, every success that had built Cortez Dynamics into an industry leader. Steinberg finally spoke, his voice carrying the affected authority of old money and older prejudices. "Some matters require immediate attention, Jefferson. Surely you understand the need for agility in leadership decisions." The pause before agility hung in the air like a threat, and Malik recognized it for what it was: corporate speak designed to mask racial bias behind business terminology. The live-stream counter in the corner of the room showed 1,247 viewers and climbing. Though Malik hadn't yet noticed the small red light that would soon illuminate the true nature of this gathering. What he did notice was the way Morrison kept glancing at her phone, Rodriguez's nervous fidgeting with his wedding ring, and Thompson's barely concealed smirk. All telltale signs that something had been planned without his knowledge or consent. Malik settled back in his chair, his experienced eye cataloguing every micro-expression, every shifted posture, every avoided glance. 3 decades in corporate America had taught him to read these signs like a meteorologist reading storm clouds. The tempest was coming, but he would weather it with the dignity and grace that had carried him through every challenge in his remarkable career. Steinberg cleared his throat and assumed the tone of a prosecutor delivering an opening statement. "We need to discuss the company's performance trajectory and certain concerns that have been brought to the board's attention." His words were measured, clinical, designed to sound reasonable to the growing live stream audience while establishing a foundation for character assassination. Malik straightened in his chair, pulling out a manila folder thick with quarterly reports and performance metrics. "Of course, I'm pleased to discuss our Q3 results. Revenue increased 27% year over year. We secured the Pentagon's largest single-year defense contract in company history, and employee satisfaction scores reached an all-time high." Each fact was delivered with quiet confidence, backed by irrefutable data that had already been submitted to the SEC and celebrated by industry analysts. Thompson slammed his hand on the table with theatrical force, causing the coffee cups to rattle against their sources. "These numbers don't tell the whole story, Jefferson. We're talking about leadership style, cultural fit, and long-term strategic vision." His voice carried the particular venom reserved for those moments when coded language becomes necessary to mask more primitive motivations. "I'd be happy to address any specific concerns," Malik replied, his tone remaining professional even as he recognized the shifting dynamics in the room. He had seen this before, the coordinated attack, the vague accusations designed to be impossible to refute because they contained no actual substance. Rodriguez leaned forward, his designer glasses reflecting the fluorescent lights as he consulted a leather portfolio filled with what appeared to be prepared talking points. "For instance, why wasn't the board consulted before you restructured the marketing department's budget allocation? A 15% increase without proper oversight raises questions about your respect for established governance protocols." Malik's response was immediate and backed by documentation. The restructuring was performed under the discretionary authority granted to the CEO in Section 4.7 of our corporate bylaws, approved unanimously by this same board 18 months ago. The budget increase was necessitated by our expansion into the cybersecurity defense sector, which has generated $43 million in new revenue streams. Williams interrupted before Malik could continue, his interruption timed with the precision of a prosecutor objecting to testimony that threatens to exonerate the defendant. "But what about consultation? What about collaboration? Your approach seems to prioritize unilateral decision-making over consensus building." The subtext was unmistakable to anyone familiar with the racial dog whistles of corporate America. Words like aggressive, difficult, not a team player, and cultural fit were the modern vocabulary of discrimination, designed to sound professional while serving the same function as far more explicit language from previous generations. Patterson joined the chorus, his voice carrying the affected concern of someone delivering bad news to a subordinate. "We've received feedback suggesting that your leadership style may be too intense for our company culture. Some stakeholders have expressed concerns about your ability to represent Cortez dynamics in traditional business environments." Malik made careful notes in his planner, documenting each accusation along with the timestamps and exact wording. 3 years of similar comments had taught him that these moments required meticulous record-keeping, though he maintained the outward appearance of a CEO addressing routine board concerns. "Could you provide specific examples of stakeholder feedback?" Malik asked, his question delivered with the calm precision of someone who had learned to navigate these waters without betraying emotion or weakness. I'd like to address any legitimate concerns about my performance or the company's direction. Davies spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the dismissive tone of someone explaining something obvious to a slow student. It's not about specifics, Jefferson. It's about patterns. It's about perception. It's about whether you truly understand the nuances of leadership in this particular industry. The room fell silent, except for the barely audible hum of the live stream camera capturing every word, every expression, every calculated slight. Malik glanced at the small red light for the first time, his eyes narrowing slightly as he realized that whatever was happening here was being broadcast to an unknown audience. The stakes had just escalated beyond a simple boardroom power struggle. Steinberg rose from his chair with the ceremonial gravity of a judge about to deliver a verdict. The live stream viewer count had climbed to over 8,000, a number visible on the monitor that Margaret Chen nervously monitored from her corner position. What had begun as an internal corporate matter was rapidly becoming a public spectacle. After careful deliberation, Steinberg announced, his voice projecting to both the room and the growing online audience, "This board has determined that Jefferson no longer represents the leadership direction that Cortez Dynamics requires for its continued success and growth." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Malik's pen stopped moving across his legal pad, his hand suspended in mid-sentence as the full implications of Steinberg's statement registered. No vote had been called. No formal procedures had been followed. No documentation had been presented. This was an execution disguised as corporate governance. Thompson stood next, brandishing a manila folder like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "We've compiled a comprehensive analysis of performance deficiencies that demonstrate a pattern of leadership failures inconsistent with our corporate values and stakeholder expectations." He opened the folder with theatrical flourish, revealing pages of charts and graphs that Malik had never seen before. "These metrics clearly indicate substandard performance in key areas," Thompson continued, his voice gaining momentum as he warmed to his performance. "Stakeholder engagement scores, cultural alignment assessments, strategic vision compatibility indexes, all below acceptable thresholds for executive leadership in the defense contracting sector." Williams joined the orchestrated attack, his voice carrying the false concern of someone delivering difficult but necessary medicine. "Furthermore, we've documented concerning patterns in your decision-making processes that suggest a fundamental disconnect from the values and traditions that have made American defense contracting the global gold standard. The racial undertones weren't subtle. They were barely coded references to traditional American values and cultural alignment that would have been immediately recognizable to anyone who had navigated corporate discrimination in the modern era. But delivered in the language of business metrics and stakeholder analysis, they maintained a veneer of professional legitimacy. Rodriguez produced a second folder, this one containing what appeared to be employee testimonials and performance reviews. "We've received numerous reports questioning your ability to effectively represent Cortez Dynamics in high-level government negotiations and traditional business environments. Your approach is simply too different from what our clients and partners have come to expect." Malik listened to each accusation with the stoic composure of someone who had anticipated this moment for months. His face revealed nothing beyond professional attention, though his mind was cataloguing every statement, every legal vulnerability, every procedural violation that was being broadcast to thousands of witnesses. "I'd like to review these performance metrics and employee testimonials," Malik said calmly, extending his hand toward the folders. "As CEO, I have the right to examine any documentation being used to evaluate my performance." Steinberg's refusal was immediate and absolute. "That won't be necessary, Jefferson. This decision has already been finalized. Security will escort you from the building within the hour, and all access credentials will be deactivated immediately." For the first time, Malik allowed a slight smile to cross his features. Not one of defeat, but of someone whose opponent had just made a critical tactical error. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew his phone, typing a brief message while maintaining eye contact with Steinberg. The message was simple: Execute Protocol 7. The recipient was Sarah Kim, his executive assistant, who had been waiting 18 months for those exact 3 words. Malik stood with unhurried dignity, gathering his papers and placing them carefully in his briefcase. "I understand your position," he said, his voice carrying a subtle undertone that suggested depths of preparation these board members couldn't fathom. "However, there are certain legal and contractual obligations that must be addressed before any leadership transition can occur." The comment hung in the air like a promise and a warning, though its full significance wouldn't become clear until the next act of this corporate drama began to unfold. Rodriguez slammed his leather portfolio shut with enough force to make the water glasses ring like tuning forks. "Legal obligations. You're no longer in a position to make demands about legal anything, Jefferson. Security will be here in 10 minutes, and you can discuss your legal concerns with them on your way out." Malik remained in his chair, his posture relaxed despite the escalating hostility surrounding him. Under Texas corporate law, a sitting CEO has the right to a 48-hour transition period for the transfer of critical business operations. This isn't a request, it's a legal requirement outlined in Section 302.15 of the State Commercial Code. Thompson's face flushed red with the kind of anger that comes from having one's authority questioned by someone deemed inferior. "Don't quote law to us, Jefferson. We've been running corporations since before you knew what a boardroom looked like." The comment carried clear racial undertones that would have been actionable in any other context, but delivered in the heat of corporate warfare, it masked as aggressive negotiation. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, employees had begun to gather in small clusters, their conversations creating a low buzz of speculation that penetrated even the soundproofed executive suite. Word was spreading through the building that something unprecedented was happening on the 42nd floor, and the usual efficiency of corporate life was grinding to a halt as people strained to understand the implications. Williams stood and began pacing behind his chair, his movement creating a sense of theatrical urgency designed to pressure Malik into compliance. "You're creating unnecessary drama, Jefferson. The decision has been made. The transition will happen immediately, and any resistance will only make things more difficult for everyone involved." The livestream counter now showed over 15,000 viewers, and the comment section was erupting with reactions ranging from outrage to support to confusion. Corporate executives being terminated in real time wasn't standard entertainment, but the racial dynamics were impossible to miss for anyone paying attention to the coded language and power dynamics playing out on their screens. Margaret Chen's phone began ringing with increasing frequency. Reporters, investors, employees, and curious observers who had stumbled across the live stream were demanding explanations for what appeared to be a corporate coup happening in real time. Each call increased the pressure on everyone in the room, though none more than Malik, who sat calmly taking notes while his career was being dismantled in front of a global audience. Patterson joined the attack with the measured cruelty of someone who had clearly prepared his remarks in advance. "Your stubbornness is exactly why this action was necessary. A real leader would recognize when their time was up and exit gracefully rather than creating this spectacle for everyone to endure." Davies picked up the thread, his voice carrying the dismissive tone of someone explaining obvious facts to a difficult child. "The board has made its decision through proper channels with appropriate deliberation. Your refusal to accept that decision demonstrates exactly the kind of judgment problems that necessitated this action in the first place." For the first time, Malik's composure showed the slightest crack, not of fear or defeat, but of controlled anger at the coordinated nature of the attack. He had expected resistance and discrimination, but the calculated cruelty of this public humiliation exceeded even his worst-case scenarios. Morrison, who had remained silent throughout the early proceedings, finally spoke with the tone of someone delivering a medical diagnosis. The board will be issuing a press release within the hour explaining the leadership transition and the reasons behind it. Your cooperation in making this as smooth as possible would be appreciated by everyone involved. Malik's phone buzzed with a response from Sarah Kim. Protocol 7 activated. Legal team standing by. Pentagon liaison confirmed. Media statements prepared. All documentation secured. He glanced at the message and felt the familiar calm that came with superior preparation, meeting unexpected opportunity. "I understand your eagerness to proceed," Malik said, his voice carrying a new undertone of quiet confidence. "But I should warn you that Cortez Dynamics has certain federal contracts that require specific protocols for any leadership changes. The Department of Defense takes a very dim view of unauthorized disruptions to their strategic partnerships." Steinberg waved dismissively, though his gesture carried less confidence than his earlier pronouncements. "We've handled government contracts for decades, Jefferson. Whatever paperwork needs to be filed can be managed by competent people who understand how these relationships actually work." The comment was the final tactical error that would ultimately seal the board's fate, though none of them understood the magnitude of their miscalculation. Malik smiled genuinely for the first time since entering the room, the smile of someone whose opponent had just walked into a carefully prepared trap. The conference phone in the center of the mahogany table erupted with the sharp electronic trill that indicated an incoming call from a priority government line. The distinctive ringtone, reserved for Pentagon communications, cut through the boardroom tension like a sword through silk, instantly transforming the atmosphere from corporate drama to national security alert. Steinberg lunged for the phone controls, but Malik's voice stopped him with quiet authority. "That's a DoD priority line. As the current CEO, I'm required by federal law to answer." He pressed the speaker button before anyone could object, and the crisp, no-nonsense voice of General Patricia Hayes filled the room. "This is General Hayes, Defense Logistics Agency. I need to speak with CEO Jefferson immediately regarding Operation Sentinel and the emergency authorization protocols for Contract DL-47 Alpha." Her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance, regardless of whatever corporate politics might be interfering with national security operations. The 7 board members looked at each other with growing unease as the full implications of the call began to register. Thompson opened his mouth to intervene, but Malik had already responded with the professional courtesy that characterized all his military communications. "General Hayes, this is Malik Jefferson. I'm currently in a board meeting, but I'm available to discuss any urgent DoD requirements." His voice had shifted into the tone he reserved for Pentagon briefings, crisp, confident, and completely professional in a way that contrasted sharply with the corporate theater that had been playing out for the past hour. "Mr. Jefferson, I've got Secretary Austin's office holding for immediate confirmation on the $800 million Phase 3 authorization for the Integrated Defense Systems project. We need your biometric confirmation and CEO authorization within the next 2 hours, or the entire contract timeline gets pushed back 6 months. Is there any reason this timeline might be compromised?" Steinberg could no longer contain himself, his voice cracking with desperation as he leaned toward the speakerphone. "General, this is Richard Steinberg, chairman of the board. Mr. Jefferson is no longer serving as CEO of Cortez Dynamics, so any authorizations will need to be handled through new leadership protocols." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds, but felt like an eternity to everyone in the room except Malik, who had anticipated this exact moment for 18 months. When General Hayes finally responded, her voice carried the kind of ice-cold professionalism that preceded career-ending consequences for anyone foolish enough to interfere with national defense priorities. "Mr. Steinberg, according to our security clearance database, Mr. Jefferson is the only individual at Cortez Dynamics currently authorized for Phase 3 defense contract modifications. His security clearance, biometric authentication, and Pentagon liaison status cannot be transferred without a minimum 90-day review process conducted by Defense Intelligence Agency security specialists. Rodriguez found his voice, though it came out as more of a squeak than the confident baritone he had displayed earlier. Surely there must be alternative authorization procedures for emergency situations like this one. General Hayes's response was immediate and devastating. Mr. Rodriguez, what I'm hearing is that Cortez Dynamics Board has created an unauthorized disruption to a critical defense contract without consulting DoD protocol requirements. Secretary Austin will not be pleased to learn that corporate politics are interfering with national security priorities. Patterson, Morrison, Williams, and Davies sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of their tactical error became clear. They had assumed that terminating a black CEO would be handled the same way as any other corporate power play, without considering that Malik's value to the company extended far beyond their ability to comprehend or replace. The conference room door opened with perfect timing as Sarah Kim entered, carrying a thick manila folder marked Protocol 7, Confidential. Her entrance was so precisely choreographed that it was clear she had been monitoring the situation and waiting for this exact moment to provide maximum impact. "Mr. Jefferson," she announced clearly enough for both the room and the live stream to hear, "the Protocol 7 documentation you requested has been compiled and verified by our legal team. All supporting materials are ready for your review." She placed the folder in front of Malik, with the ceremonial precision of someone delivering a royal decree. General Hayes continued as if the board members were no longer relevant to her concerns. "Mr. Jefferson, given what appears to be an internal corporate dispute, I need to know if you're still in position to execute your DoD authorization responsibilities. The Secretary's office won't wait for Cortez Dynamics to sort out whatever management issues are creating this confusion." Malik opened the Protocol 7 folder, revealing documents that had been 18 months in preparation: stock ownership transfers, SEC filings, corporate governance challenges, and a comprehensive legal strategy that no one in the room had anticipated. His response to General Hayes was delivered with the calm authority of someone who had just activated a plan that would reshape everything. "General Hayes, I remain fully committed to meeting all Department of Defense obligations and timeline requirements. Recent developments at Cortez Dynamics will not interfere with our national security commitments, and I have the full legal authority to ensure contract compliance, regardless of any internal corporate discussions that may be occurring." The livestream counter had climbed past 25,000 viewers, and the chat exploded with reactions as people began to understand that they were witnessing not just a corporate termination, but a masterclass in strategic preparation meeting discriminatory overreach. Sarah Kim opened the Protocol 7 folder with the deliberate precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence that would seal a conviction. The documents inside represented 18 months of meticulous preparation, legal research, and strategic planning that had anticipated this exact scenario with devastating accuracy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to both the boardroom and the live stream audience that had swelled to over 35,000 viewers, "Protocol 7 represents Mr. Jefferson's comprehensive documentation of systematic discrimination at Cortez Dynamics, along with his strategic response to protect both the company and its stakeholders from the consequences of prejudicial decision-making." The first document she revealed was a stock ownership summary that caused audible gasps from the 7 board members. Through a carefully structured series of investment vehicles and strategic partnerships developed over 18 months, Malik had quietly acquired 31% of Cortez Dynamics stock, enough to trigger corporate governance protocols that required board approval for any CEO termination. Steinberg's face had gone pale as the implications became clear. "This is impossible. We monitor all insider trading and stock acquisitions. There's no way Jefferson could have acquired that level of ownership without disclosure requirements." Sarah's smile was professional, but unmistakably triumphant. "All acquisitions were properly disclosed through SEC filings, as required by federal law. The Meridian Investment Group, Jefferson Family Trust, and Strategic Defense Partnership Fund all filed appropriate documentation. The acquisitions were structured to avoid triggering hostile takeover provisions while maintaining full regulatory compliance. Thompson grabbed his phone and began frantically calling his broker, trying to verify what seemed impossible: that the black CEO they had just humiliated on live stream actually owned enough of their company to potentially control its future. His increasingly agitated conversation was clearly audible to the entire room. General Hayes's voice cut through the chaos with military precision. "Mr. Jefferson, I need confirmation that these corporate governance issues will not interfere with DoD contract compliance. Secretary Austin's office requires assurance that Cortez Dynamics remains a stable and reliable defense partner." Malik's response was delivered with the calm authority of someone who had prepared for this moment since his first day as CEO. "General Hayes, I can provide absolute assurance that all DoD contracts will be fulfilled on schedule and within specifications. However, I should inform you that any attempt to remove me from my position would likely result in the immediate termination of all federal defense contracts, as my security clearances and authorizations cannot be transferred without a minimum 90-day Pentagon review process." The second document Sarah revealed was even more devastating. A comprehensive legal brief documenting 18 months of discriminatory comments, exclusionary behavior, and racially motivated decision-making by the board members. Email screenshots, recorded conversations, witness statements, and documented patterns of bias that would make any employment attorney's career. Rodriguez was frantically texting, presumably to his lawyer, while Williams had begun sweating despite the boardroom's air conditioning. Patterson sat motionless, staring at the documents as if they were a cancer diagnosis. Morrison and Davies whispered urgently to each other, their earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. Sarah continued her methodical destruction of their position. The legal documentation includes 47 instances of discriminatory comments, 32 violations of corporate equal opportunity policies, and 18 separate incidents that constitute federal civil rights violations under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. The live-stream chat had exploded with reactions ranging from celebration to outrage to amazement as viewers realized they were witnessing a masterclass in strategic justice. Corporate lawyers across the country were undoubtedly taking notes on what would become a textbook example of preparation meeting discrimination. Davies finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak rather than his earlier confident baritone. This is blackmail. This is extortion. You can't use corporate ownership to threaten the board." Malik's response was delivered with the patient tone of someone explaining obvious facts to a slow student. "This is corporate governance, Davies. This is legal compliance. This is the consequence of attempting to terminate a CEO without following proper procedures or legal requirements." The third document was the final nail in the coffin, a timeline showing that the board's discrimination had intensified immediately after Malik began securing the Pentagon contracts that made Cortez Dynamics indispensable to American defense operations. Their attempt to remove him wasn't just racially motivated, it was also strategically catastrophic for national security interests. General Hayes delivered the coup de grace without knowing it. "Mr. Jefferson, given the critical nature of our current defense contracts, the Pentagon will be conducting a comprehensive review of Cortez Dynamics corporate governance to ensure that internal disputes don't compromise national security operations. Any board members who might interfere with defense priorities will be flagged as potential security risks." Within 2 hours, Steinberg, Thompson, Williams, Patterson, and Rodriguez had submitted their resignations. Morrison and Davies were terminated for cause. The stock price initially dropped 40% on news of the corporate chaos, but recovered within 24 hours when investors realized that Malik's Pentagon connections made Cortez Dynamics virtually irreplaceable in the defense contracting sector. The Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into discriminatory practices at Cortez Dynamics, while the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission opened parallel proceedings. Social media erupted with hashtags like Protocol 7 and Justice Served as the story went viral across every major platform. By the end of the week, Malik Jefferson had become a symbol of strategic resistance to corporate discrimination, while the former board members faced legal bills, employment investigations, and public humiliation that would follow them for the rest of their careers. 1 week after the live stream that changed everything, Malik Jefferson stood before the assembled employees of Cortez Dynamics in the company's main auditorium. The corporate town hall meeting had been hastily organized to address the national media attention and restore confidence in the company's leadership, but it had evolved into something much more significant, a moment of healing and transformation for an organization forced to confront its own prejudices. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on monitors throughout the building. Employees who had witnessed years of subtle discrimination finally had a framework for understanding what they had seen, while others grappled with the uncomfortable realization that they had been complicit in a system they had never fully recognized. 18 months ago, Malik began, his voice carrying easily to the back of the auditorium without amplification. I realized that no matter how hard I worked, no matter what results I delivered, no matter how much value I created for this company and its stakeholders, there would always be people who saw my success as a threat rather than an achievement. The silence in the auditorium was complete, broken only by the soft whir of camera equipment from the news crews covering what had become a nationally significant moment in corporate America's ongoing struggle with racial equity. I could have responded with anger. I could have fought back with the same weapons they used against me: prejudice, exclusion, and personal attacks. Instead, I chose to build something better. Protocol 7 wasn't designed as revenge, it was designed as justice. Malik paused, allowing the distinction to register with his audience. He gestured to the diverse faces looking back at him, employees of every background, age, and ethnicity who had helped build Cortez Dynamics into an industry leader. Every person in this company deserves to be evaluated based on their contributions, their character, and their commitment to excellence. Your worth as a human being should never be determined by the color of your skin, your gender, your age, or any other characteristic that has nothing to do with your ability to do exceptional work. An African-American woman in the third row wiped tears from her eyes, while an older white engineer nodded slowly in recognition of truths he had been reluctant to acknowledge. The moment represented something larger than corporate reform. It was a microcosm of America's ongoing struggle to live up to its founding promises of equality and justice. Cortez Dynamics will become the model for diversity and inclusion in the defense industry, Malik continued, his voice gaining strength as he outlined his vision for the company's future. We will establish scholarship programs for underrepresented students in engineering and technology. We will partner with historically black colleges and universities to create pipelines for talented graduates. We will demonstrate that diversity isn't just morally right, it's also strategically superior. The applause started slowly, but built to a thunderous ovation as employees realized they were witnessing not just a corporate restructuring, but a fundamental reimagining of what American business could become when guided by principles of justice rather than prejudice. The Pentagon contracts that saved this company weren't awarded because of my race, Malik said, his voice cutting through the applause. They were awarded because we delivered superior results with integrity and professionalism, but the discrimination I faced wasn't because of my performance. It was because of prejudices that have no place in American business or American society. He concluded with words that would be quoted in business schools and civil rights organizations for years to come. Power isn't given to us to diminish others. It's entrusted to us to elevate everyone around us. Protocol 7 was never about one man's career. It was about creating a system where talent and character matter more than skin color and connections. That's the Cortez Dynamics we're building together. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes, but its impact would last much longer. Malik Jefferson looked directly into the camera that had captured his humiliation just 1 week earlier, but now his gaze carried the quiet confidence of someone who had transformed institutional discrimination into systemic change. The same live-stream technology that had been weaponized against him was now broadcasting a message of hope and strategic resistance to viewers across the globe. If you're watching this and you've faced discrimination in your workplace, in your community, or in any area of your life, remember this: preparation is the foundation of justice. Document everything. Build strategic alliances. Understand the legal and institutional frameworks that protect your rights, and never ever underestimate the power of patient, methodical planning. He paused, allowing his words to resonate with the thousands of viewers who had found inspiration in his story. Comments poured across the screen from people sharing their own experiences with workplace discrimination and their determination to follow Malik's example of strategic resistance. The board members who attempted to destroy my career made one critical mistake. Malik continued, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They assumed that a black man in a position of authority must have gotten there through luck, connections, or affirmative action. They never considered that I might have earned my position through superior preparation, strategic thinking, and an absolute commitment to excellence. The smile broadened as he delivered the final message that would become a rallying cry for anyone facing institutional prejudice. Protocol 7 is now available as a template for anyone who needs it. The legal frameworks, documentation strategies, and tactical approaches we developed are being shared with civil rights organizations, employment attorneys, and anyone else who believes that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. He leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on the conspiratorial tone of someone sharing a secret with allies. And for those who think they can continue business as usual, who believe they can discriminate without consequences, who assume that people like me will quietly accept whatever treatment you decide to give us, remember that the person you're underestimating might just be the person who holds the keys to your future. The screen faded to black, but not before displaying the final message that would define Malik Jefferson's legacy. Protocol 7. When preparation meets opportunity, justice prevails. Your move.